Loving eternal God, once again we're here to learn more about you and your teachings, but we ask that you open our hearts and our minds this day to give us your message through your humble servant, we pray. Amen. So, boldly living our call, holy boldness. You're wondering, why did I pick this title? Well, I actually didn't. This came from the theme for our charge conference for this year. A lot of the churches, when they have a charge conference, they have a big worship service because it's usually done on a Sunday. And so I'm incorporating some of it today because we have our church conference Tuesday night. So you're getting most of it today instead of Tuesday night when we talk or go through the things that we need to. So it's all about holy boldness, boldly living our call. And that means, how do we continue to be a disciple in this world? Amongst all the crazy busy times, amongst all the things that take our time away from being still and acknowledging God in our lives. So, if I were to ask you, what is a disciple, what would you say? Follower of what?
Follower of Christ.
Yes, follower of Christ. Wow, somebody's been reading their Bible. That's very good. Yeah, a disciple is somebody who's completely devoted to a teacher, somebody who's following Christ, we call a Christian disciple. And there's a very strong relationship there. It goes beyond just a student and a teacher. It goes because they don't, that the student tries to emulate the teacher's life, right? As a disciple, we try and emulate how Christ modeled life for all of us. And so Christians, we become disciples as we continue to strive to live like Jesus did, to his teachings. Okay, so that's part of it. What's the another part of being a disciple? What are we supposed to do with being a disciple?
Great
Teachers, yeah, we pass it on, don't we? Right? We pass it on, we pass modeling that life on to others. We show them the love of God, we show them different things about God. Sometimes we tell our stories, right? We act as a witness to tell how God has worked in our lives. And we did that a few weeks ago. Okay, so we have this story about boldly living our call. I want to ask how many of you are always so willing when you're out and about telling people about God. Are you willing to do that or not? Because I know sometimes that can be scary. But we have been given a gift. We've been given a gift of the Bible, of all of Christ's teachings. And we've been given this time to be here in worship. We have the gift of learning how to be a disciple through our Sunday school, through our Bible studies, through confirmation, through worshiping together, through sharing our stories, how God has touched our lives. We also have been given a gift like what we did last night here, having that community dinner. All of those that are working in the kitchen, you don't hear what the people are saying at the tables. When we're clearing the tables or when we're checking to make sure they finish their plate and ready for dessert, first of all, they say the food is delicious, which of course it is. But secondly, someone like, thank you for doing this. They're so grateful to us for offering this community meal. And some yes, we'll be back in the spring for the ham dinner. But they're so thankful for that. And also they loved all the desserts too. I don't think anybody didn't like one of the desserts. They were all delicious. So that went really well as well. But this was a way for us to simply offer a meal, a time of friendship, a time of fellowship for those who may or may not have that kind of food, or maybe they just don't cook, and they loved having a real home-cooked meal. But it was also a fellowship, because I saw some people at tables, that had never met each other, and they struck up conversation, okay? They started talking, they started connecting. They were building relationships right in front of us. Now, how does that tie in at all with the story that I read from Samuel with Hannah? And there's another thing I wanted to share too. But Hannah was this wonderful person who was barren at the time. She couldn't bear children. And Elkanah, back in the day, this is way back in the Old Testament, they tended to have more than one wife. Okay, that's not what we do now, but he had, another wife. And that wife, of course, bore children. And you would have thought that, okay, why doesn't he love that wife and all those children, more than he loves Hannah? But he was drawn to Hannah. So he kept trying to take care of her even more, but that only drew more attention to her. And so the other wife used to, razz her and everything else like that. So she always felt so uncomfortable. And especially back in those days, it was important for you to carry on the lineage. And so Hannah, in order for her to be considered, a worthwhile person, she needed to bear children, but more than not, she needed to bear a son to carry on Elkanah's name, to go ahead and pass that on. So what does she do? Every year they go to the temple, they make their sacrifices, and nothing happens. She's getting very despondent. She's just, what do I do? So she takes a bold move. She goes to the temple and she basically just pleads and begs to God, prays over and over again. One, please give me a son. Help me to bear a child. But she said, if you give me that son, I'll give him back to you. I'll make sure that he's dedicated and devoted to you all the days of his life. And so Eli overhears her. Eli is the prophet at the time. And of course he thinks that she's, drunk or something because of the way she's acting. But she says, no, I'm really praying to God here. And so he basically said, well, may your petitions be fulfilled. Well, next thing you know, she does get pregnant. She gives birth to Samuel. And Samuel was one who not only was raised in the temple and he served faithfully all the days of his life, but he had to serve in a very difficult time. He was being so faithful, but then also the people wanted to have a king because other cultures around had kings, and they thought that they needed to have a king. They didn't trust Samuel's kids at that time, Samuel's sons, to take over the business, so to speak. So, Samuel pleads to God and says, hey, I'm so upset. And God goes, no, it's not you. They're upset with me. So God says, go ahead. We're going to go ahead and anoint a king. And Samuel eventually anoints Saul. And at first things go okay because Saul is listening to Samuel. And what is God telling us to do? But ultimately, Saul lets the kingship get to his head. He gets a big ego. And then he doesn't listen to Samuel anymore. Well, then God says, okay, this is not going to happen. I'm not pleased with this. You're going to go ahead and anoint somebody else to become king. And Samuel's like, yeah, but if Saul finds out, I'm dead. This is the whole story of Samuel in a very brief period of time here. I'm giving you a very abridged version. Ultimately, so Samuel still is boldly living his call because he goes to, where do you think he goes to? Do you know whose family he goes to? Jesse. He goes to the family of Jesse. Jesse has all these sons. And so Samuel meets every son at first. He keeps thinking each son is the one that God wants to anoint. And God kept saying, no. And then finally, Samuel says to Jesse, do you have any other sons? He's like, yeah, I got this one little one who's out there tending to the sheep. That turns out to be David. We've heard the story of David and Goliath also, right? So David comes in, and the Lord tells Samuel, this is the one you anoint him king. And so David becomes king, and that there goes more of the history. So here's Hannah, who was so marginalized, but yet she trusted in God, and she boldly went to pray at that temple and just pray to God. So she gives birth to a son, and that son made such a huge difference in the course of history throughout the Old Testament. And we know that David is very important even in Jesus' lineage. Okay, so that's a little bit of Samuel. And then we have this story about Jesus telling the disciples, he's sending them out to go and make disciples, right? To all the nations, go ahead and make disciples and celebrating the word, teaching the word, and sharing the good And sometimes we're really good at that, but other times we just want to hear the good news in church, and then the rest of our week we just kind of do our own thing. But you never know when God's going to present a situation for you. You never know when God is going to ask you to do something for somebody else. And so often we think that we don't make a difference in somebody else's life. But there was a story I shared with you when I first came here, and I didn't tell you the end of the story. It was about the carpenter and the unbuilder. I'm still not going to share the end of the story yet, but I'm going to tell you the next part of what happens in the story of the carpenter and the unbuilder. If you recall, there was a carpenter, and he got an invitation by the king, which is an invitation by God, to come to dinner. And so he does all these things to prepare, because this is a really big thing. And so finally, after he gets all his preparations ready, he starts and sets out on the journey. Well, once he gets to a certain part and it turns nighttime, he builds a shelter. And then the next morning when he gets up to continue the journey, he realizes he can make more improvements on his shelter. Remember, he's a carpenter, right? So he's going to keep building. Well, little by little, he keeps losing his way about the invitation. And so, the king gets wondering where he is, and the king sends somebody to help him, and that's the unbuilder. And the unbuilder comes and talks to him, and the carpenter, of course, invites him to come into lunch into his house, and this is probably the 4th, 5th, or 6th house, and now it's a real house, it's not just a little tiny shelter. And the unbuilder says, no, I'll stay out here. And so eventually the carpenter realizes and remembers about the invitation. So he and the unbuilder, they set out. And every now and then, the unbuilder lets the carpenter build another shelter, and because that's just the way the carpenter is. But the end that you heard last time was that the king still kept the food warm, because the king could do that. Bottom line is that the carpenter is still struggling at times, because he loses sight of what is important in life, what is the main thing, is to go ahead and serve God. And so he continues on this journey, but the unbuilder is there to help him. But as they continue this journey, every now and then the carpenter is getting frustrated, and he's feeling guilty because he knows that he still sometimes needs to build a shelter, still sometimes needs to build a house, and he tries not to build too big a one anymore because he's trying to stay focused on this journey. But he struggles every now and then, and he gets upset with himself. And finally he says to the unbuilder, when are we finally going to get to the king's house, to the castle? When are we finally going to get there? I don't know how much longer I can do this. He's getting frustrated, and it's just like, this takes a lot out of you when you're just trying to strive and be, like Christ in all that you do. So the unbuilder finally says, turn around and look back. After they had just left the shelter a little ways, And so he turns around, and he looks back, and he sees there's a woman who's struggling and is just kind of falling apart. She doesn't even know if she can continue on her journey. And then she sees, say that 3 times fast, she sees the shelter. And so she goes into the shelter and gets some rest and respite. And so the unbuilder says, you don't need the shelter anymore, but this woman was about ready to give up on her faith journey. And yet you provided a shelter for her so she can seek some rest and be renewed. And then she can continue the journey. So that's the next part of that story. And of course then the carpenter and the unbuilder, they keep going. So there's times when we don't know when we've helped somebody else out. And maybe if we look back, we might be able to see, but we don't always know when we have helped somebody or touched somebody else's life. And so as we continue in our ministry here at Rotterdam, as we continue to build up our church for the future, we need to first trust that God is calling us to be witnesses of our faith, that God has given us gifts to share with others, and And that God is asking us not to hide our light under a bushel, under the basket, right? We need to let our light shine. We need to be bold. We need to be willing to let people know that they can be loved, they can be helped, because God loves them too. So I ask that all of you, as you continue to live out your life, sometimes you're going to need that shelter and some time for rest and renewal, because we all do. We all get tired. But I don't want you to give up on the journey. This journey is too important for each and every one of us, because this journey leads us to God. Be bold and live out your call. Take time for rest and renewal when you need to, but don't turn away, because the end is in sight for all of us.